Sophia Miller thought she had the perfect life, a loving husband, 2 wonderful kids, a beautiful home, and a marriage built on years of trust. But when she stumbled upon a series of mysterious files hidden away in their attic, everything she believed about Liam Miller shattered in an instant. The man she loved had a terrifying secret. A secret that would unravel their entire world and lead her down a dark path she never saw coming. As the truth slowly emerged, Sophia Miller realized that the man she thought she knew was a stranger, one with a deadly past that now threatened her family's future. Liam Miller and Sophia Miller had what seemed like an ideal life, a picture-perfect existence that many envied. They lived in a spacious suburban home, nestled in a quiet neighborhood where tree-lined streets were filled with children playing under the warm sun. Their house was always immaculate, freshly mowed lawns, tidy flower beds, and an inviting front porch. Liam Miller was a successful banker, always well-dressed in tailored suits, while Sophia Miller was a devoted stay-at-home mom, focused on raising their 2 children, Olivia and Adrian. She took pride in managing their home, making sure everything was perfect. On the surface, their life appeared flawless. Liam's Miller career was thriving, and Sophia Miller was the quintessential PTA mom, baking cookies for fundraisers, organizing school events, and volunteering at local charities. Every Sunday, they attended church as a family, known for their strong values and unwavering togetherness. Friends admired their relationship, often praising how Liam Miller spoke so highly of Sophia Miller and how effortlessly in sync they seemed. It was clear to everyone they were deeply in love. Their weekends were filled with family outings, trips to the zoo, hiking in the nearby mountains, or lazy afternoons spent in the park. Olivia and Adrian adored their parents, and Liam and Sophia's bond appeared unshakable, built on years of shared memories and mutual respect. They never fought, or at least, not in front of others. Even at home, their disagreements were rare, minor, and swiftly resolved. It was the kind of marriage people aspired to, the kind of love story others wanted to emulate. Yet, despite their outward perfection, something about Liam never quite sat right with Sophia. He had a way of deflecting questions, especially about his work. Liam was always vague when discussing his job, dismissing her curiosity with vague statements about confidentiality and professionalism. Sophia never thought much of it. After all, his job required discretion. As a supportive wife, she never pressed him for details. But there were moments, fleeting yet unsettling, when Liam felt like a stranger. On the rare occasions he worked late, he seemed distant, almost cold, when he returned home. His conversations were short, his eyes unfocused, as if his mind was somewhere else. Gone was the attentive, affectionate husband she had known. Instead, there was a man with a layer of detachment, something tugging at his attention, pulling him away from her and the kids. Still, Sophia pushed those thoughts aside. She told herself it was just stress from work, the pressures of providing for their family. Life had been busy for both of them. Maybe he was simply exhausted. But what truly unsettled her was how often Liam would slip away for long periods without explanation. His phone was always left face down on the kitchen counter, a small but puzzling habit. And when she asked about his whereabouts, he would brush it off with simple excuses, work calls, late meetings, a conference that ran long. Even so, they were happy. Or so it appeared. Sophia believed in the life they had built together. She trusted Liam, perhaps too much. It was easier to ignore the occasional unease, to silence the nagging doubts, and focus on their perfect little world. A world that, unbeknownst to her, was built on a fragile facade. And behind that facade lay a darkness that would soon consume everything she thought she knew. The seeds of doubt had been planted, but the truth was still far from her grasp. It started on an ordinary Saturday morning, one of those peaceful days where the kids played in the backyard, and the house was filled with the comforting hum of the coffee maker. Sophia was sorting through the mail when she found the envelope. Large, thick, slightly frayed at the edges, heavier than a typical piece of correspondence. Her eyes locked onto the elegant, professional handwriting on the front. It was addressed to Liam. But it wasn't a bill. It wasn't a promotional offer. No, this envelope was from a law firm. Sophia's heart skipped a beat. Liam had never mentioned anything about legal matters. And yet, here it was. Something was off. Something was wrong. She just didn't know yet. How deeply? Sophia placed the envelope on the kitchen counter, figuring she would ask Liam about it when he came home. But when Liam returned that afternoon, the envelope was gone. Her eyes scanned the counter. Nothing. No trace of it. Her stomach twisted into a knot of unease. She hadn't imagined it. It was real. Wasn't it? Before she could bring it up, Liam was his usual self, charming, friendly, and completely unaffected, as if nothing had happened. There was no sign of worry, no shift in his demeanor. He laughed with the kids, kissed her cheek like he always did, and carried on as if the mysterious letter had never existed. Sophia tried to shake off the unsettling feeling. It was probably just routine paperwork, she told herself. Liam was a successful banker, and legal matters were not uncommon in his line of work. Right? But the thought refused to leave her mind. The more she dwelled on it, the more her unease grew. She hadn't seen what was inside the envelope, but she just knew, it was something important. Something Liam didn't want her to see. Days passed, but the nagging feeling refused to fade. Sophia forced herself to go through her daily routine, making breakfast, picking up the kids from school, handling the house chores, but her mind kept drifting back to that letter. Each time Liam's phone rang, she found herself glancing at the clock, wondering, where was he going? Who was he talking to? What was he hiding? She didn't want to be the kind of wife who doubted her husband. She didn't want to believe that Liam could be lying to her, but she couldn't ignore it anymore. Then, almost a week later, Sophia found herself in Liam's home office, dusting off the shelves, putting books back in place, trying to distract herself from the gnawing suspicion she refused to acknowledge. That's when she noticed it. A drawer in his desk was slightly open. Something inside caught her eye, a folder, liamed with a series of numbers and a recent date. Her heartbeat quickened. She pulled it out, her fingers trembling as she flipped it open. The contents inside shook her to her core. Financial documents. Detailed. Intricate. Full of figures and names she didn't recognize. A list of places and people, strangers to her, yet clearly significant to Liam. And then, on the last page, was something that sent a cold shiver down her spine. A photograph. Grainy, but unmistakable. A woman. She was standing outside what looked like a city hotel. Sophia's breath caught in her throat. She didn't recognize her, but the longer she stared at the image, the deeper her sense of dread became. It wasn't just a random picture. It felt too deliberate, too personal. Her hands shook as she placed the folder back where she found it, forcing herself to breathe. It's nothing sinister. It's just work-related. That's what she told herself. But the seed of doubt had been planted. And once planted, it was impossible to ignore. Liam had always been the perfect husband, the loving father, and the charming man everyone adored. But now? Doubt had crept into her thoughts like a slow, insidious poison. What was he hiding? And why did it feel like her entire world was starting to crumble? The weeks that followed only deepened Sophia's unease. She tried to go on with her daily life, playing the role of the perfect wife and mother, but the nagging fear in her chest never left. She started watching Liam closely, observing his every move. And the more she watched, the more she realized something had changed. His late nights became more frequent. His phone rang constantly, sometimes in the middle of the night. And when she asked about his day, he'd brush her off with vague answers. Just work stuff, he would say, his voice casual. And Sophia would force herself to let it go. But deep down, she knew the truth. There was more to it than that. One evening, as Sophia was cleaning out the attic, something happened that would change everything. The attic had always been a storage space, old boxes, forgotten toys, and seasonal decorations collecting dust. She had been meaning to go through the clutter for months, but life got in the way. Tonight, however, she needed a distraction. She needed something to take her mind off Liam and his secrets. As she sifted through the dust-covered boxes, her eyes landed on something that didn't belong. A large, dusty cabinet, tucked away in a dark corner, hidden behind stacks of old blankets and forgotten Christmas decorations. Sophia frowned. She had never noticed it before. It looked out of place, as if someone had intentionally hidden it there. Her heart raced as she stepped closer. She ran her fingers over the old wood, cold, rough, unfamiliar. The cabinet was locked, and the key was nowhere to be found. Her hands hesitated on the handle. Something about this felt wrong, but something inside her urged her to look closer. A voice in the back of her mind whispered, "This is important." With a burst of determination, she grabbed a small screwdriver from a nearby toolbox. Her hands shook as she wedged it into the lock. With a sharp click, the lock snapped open. Sophia took a deep breath. She had no idea what she was about to find, but deep down, she knew her life was about to change forever. What caught Sophia's attention wasn't the dusty file drawers. It was the contents of the top drawer, where a thick stack of papers lay. She pulled them out cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. The documents were filled with names, dates, and locations, none of which meant anything to her. At first, it all seemed like a jumble of irrelevant information, but as she flipped through the pages, something caught her eye. There were photographs, grainy black and white images of different women. Their faces were blurred, their eyes hollow and distant, as if they were unaware of the camera capturing their every move. Each photo was paired with a name, a date, and a detailed description. On the back of each photograph, a single word was written in bold letters. Catherine's stomach twisted as she continued flipping through the papers. The photos weren't random. They were carefully cataloged, as though Liam had been keeping track of these women for a reason. Her hands trembled as she scanned the files, her mind racing with questions. What was this? Who were these women? And why were they so important to Liam? As she dug deeper, she found more disturbing details, locations, addresses, even descriptions of where each woman was last seen. It was like some twisted game, one that Catherine couldn't begin to comprehend. A sense of dread washed over her as she realized that Liam had been living a life she had never known, a life filled with dark secrets and hidden motives. The man she thought she knew, the loving husband and father, was someone else entirely. Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of what she had uncovered, but the answers were as elusive as they were terrifying. She carefully closed the drawer and locked the cabinet again, the weight of the documents heavy in her hands. Her thoughts were jumbled, her heart racing as she stumbled out of the attic. The house felt eerily quiet, as though it were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Catherine knew that her life, the life she thought she understood, was about to change forever. She couldn't ignore what she had found. There was something deeply wrong with Liam, and she had to figure out what it was before it was too late. Catherine's discovery in the attic weighed heavily on her mind for days. She couldn't shake the image of the photographs, the women whose names and faces had been carefully catalogued in Liam's files. She felt a sense of unease she couldn't explain, as if her entire reality had shifted. The man she had married, the man she had trusted with everything, was not the person she had thought him to be. She tried to rationalize what she had found. Maybe it was some kind of mistake. Perhaps the files were old, irrelevant, and had nothing to do with Liam anymore. But deep down, she knew better. Her instincts screamed that something darker was at play. Sophia decided she needed to confront Liam. The silence that had existed between them in recent weeks had grown unbearable. But she also knew that confronting him meant risking everything: the life they had built, the stability of their family, and the sense of security she had always taken for granted. But what choice did she have? The unease gnawed at her, and she couldn't bear to live in ignorance any longer. The opportunity came one evening when Liam came home later than usual. He seemed distant as he walked through the door, barely acknowledging Catherine as she stood by the kitchen counter. He dropped his briefcase and went straight to the living room without so much as a word. Catherine watched him, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it, the moment she had been dreading. She waited for the right moment, her breath shallow, gathering the courage to speak. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she walked into the living room. Her hands were shaking. Liam was sitting on the couch, his eyes fixed on the television, but he didn't seem to be paying attention. Sophia stood in front of him, holding the file she had taken from the attic, the paper still fresh in her mind. "Liam," she said, her voice trembling, "I need to know what's going on. What is this?" She placed the folder on the coffee table, the weight of the evidence clear in her actions. Liam's eyes flickered to the file for only a moment before quickly diverting his gaze. His face tightened, and for the first time, Catherine saw something unfamiliar in his eyes, a flicker of fear, something darker than she had ever seen before. It was as if the man she had known all these years was slipping away before her eyes. "Where did you find this?" Liam asked, his voice sharp. He quickly regained his composure, his tone cold and calculated, as though he was trying to regain control of the situation. Catherine could feel her pulse quicken. The words she had been rehearsing in her head suddenly slipped away. "I found it in the attic," she replied, struggling to steady her voice. "In a locked cabinet." "What are these files? Who are these women?" Liam didn't respond immediately. He simply stared at the folder, his lips pressed tightly together. Face a mask of unreadable emotions, Sophia could feel the tension in the air thick and suffocating. She had seen this side of him before, but never like this, never with such raw, unguarded fear in his eyes. Finally, Liam stood up, his movements stiff and deliberate. "You shouldn't have looked," he muttered under his breath, his voice barely audible. He reached for the folder, but Sophia pulled it away, holding it tightly against her chest. She wasn't going to back down now. "Liam, what is going on?" she demanded. "Who are these women? What is all this about?" His face hardened, and for the first time, Sophia saw something that took her completely off guard, an almost imperceptible flash of anger. He looked at her, his expression a mix of frustration and something darker, something that chilled her to the bone. "You don't understand," Liam said, his voice low and menacing. "You shouldn't have gotten involved in this. It's bigger than you think." Catherine's heart raced as the truth began to take shape. This wasn't just about a few misplaced files. This was about something far more dangerous. She could see it now, the coldness in Liam's eyes, the way he was trying to control the situation, to keep her from digging any deeper. But it was too late. She had already uncovered the darkness lurking beneath the surface of their life. As she stood there, staring at her husband, the man she had once trusted more than anyone, she realized that the life they had built together was nothing more than a facade. There was no going back from this moment. The man she had married had a secret so dark that it had taken everything she had known and twisted it into something unrecognizable. The truth was out, and Sophia had no idea where it would lead. But one thing was certain. The life she thought she understood was a lie. Sophia's hands shook as she stood there, staring at Liam. Her mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. The confession that was hanging in the air, unspoken but undeniable, was far more than she could process in that moment. She had always trusted Liam, believed in him with all her heart. And now, standing before him, she realized how little she truly knew about the man she had married. The silence in the room was deafening. Liam stood rigid, his eyes avoiding hers as though he couldn't bring himself to meet her gaze. Sophia's pulse thudded in her ears. She wanted answers, needed them, but she also knew that the truth, whatever it was, would shatter the foundation of everything she had built her life upon. He wasn't the man she thought he was, but what had he really been doing? What was the extent of his lies? She took a step forward, her voice barely a whisper. "What does all of this mean, Liam? What are you involved in?" For a moment, it seemed like he might remain silent. But then his shoulders slumped, and he exhaled slowly. I never wanted you to know this, he said, his voice quieter than before, laced with an almost imperceptible sorrow. I was trying to protect you, trying to keep you and the kids away from all of this. Sophia's heart skipped a beat. She could barely breathe, and yet she urged herself to stay calm, to not back down now that she was so close to the truth. Protect me from what? From what you've been doing. Liam looked away, his hand trembling at his sides. It's not what you think, he began, his words slow and measured, as though he were carefully choosing them, trying to manipulate the truth. I didn't hurt anyone. Not directly. I was part of something. I got involved with the wrong people, people I couldn't get away from. Sophia's mind spun. The pieces of the puzzle that had once been scattered now seemed to fall into place. But the image they created was beyond anything she could have imagined. Liam wasn't just a man with a secret life. He had been involved in something far darker, something that reached into the lives of others in ways she couldn't fathom. He continued, his words now coming in a rush. I got mixed up with a group. They have connections. Dangerous people. I didn't think it would go this far. At first, it was just money. Then it escalated. I became part of something bigger, something that I thought I could control, but it spiraled out of my hands. Sophia felt the room closing in on her, the air thick with dread. She wanted to understand, wanted to hear him explain himself, but her mind could barely keep up with the gravity of his confession. She could only stare at him, searching for any sign of the man she had married, any trace of the man who had once promised to love and protect her. But there was nothing there now but fear and regret. As Liam's story unfolded, Catherine learned the terrifying truth. The women in the photographs, the files she had discovered, they were all part of an underground operation, one that trafficked in information, money, and something far darker. Liam had been complicit, a cog in a machine he had never fully understood. But now, it had ensnared him, pulling him deeper into a web of deceit and danger. Her stomach churned as she pieced together the final revelation. The law firm's letter, the one she had found weeks ago, it had been a warning. They had been monitoring him, preparing to expose him for his role in the operation. Catherine's hands clenched into fists, her nails digging into her palms. It was worse than she could have ever imagined. The man she had married had been living a lie, and now that lie had caught up with him, and with her. Before she could say another word, the phone rang. Liam's face turned ashen, and he rushed to grab it, his hands trembling. Catherine knew immediately something was terribly wrong. As Liam picked up the phone, his expression shifted from fear to resignation. It's too late, he muttered under his breath, hanging up abruptly. The finality of the moment hit Sophia like a punch to the gut. It was over. The police had found a body.